Ladies and gentlemen, please be prepared for the first plenary session, One Vision, One Digital Economy, Unlocking ASEAN's AI Potential Through Collaboration. In this session, we explore how we can align best practices from abroad and their digital strategies to leverage AI not just as a technological tool, but as a unifying force for economic growth, regional integration, and innovation. Collaboration across borders, sectors, and disciplines is no longer optional, it is essential. This conversation will bring light to both opportunities and challenges that define ASEAN's path towards a cohesive and inclusive AI-powered future. To guide this important discussion, please welcome our moderator, Mr. Idzai Idros, along with our esteemed panelists to the stage. Let's give a round of applause. I have the pleasure now of introducing our moderator for this session, Mr. Idzai Idros, Program Manager at Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, CAS Malaysia. With a background in engineering and a passion for public policy, Idzai brings a unique blend of analytical thinking and strategic insight to his work. At CAS Malaysia, he leads impactful initiatives at the intersection of governance, technology, and leadership, helping to shape conversations on AI, sustainability, and democratic participation across Malaysia and the region. Known for his engaging moderation style and ability to connect diverse ideas and people, Idzai is committed to building inclusive platforms for dialogue and action. The stage is yours, Mr. Idzai.
All right, thank you so much, Rishi. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the CAS and MIM event. So this is for AI in ASEAN and the potential for collaboration. Before we get started, for our panel here, before I introduce them, I would just like to say I hold many roles at CAS. One of them is as a program manager. And personally, I think all of us wear many different hats. For myself, not only am I a program manager, but for my personal life, I am also a middle child and a Toastmaster. So how many middle children are there in the room today? Yes, the neglected people. And how many Toastmasters are in the room today? Toastmasters? Okay, we have very few. So for Toastmasters, just to explain it to people, Toastmasters, we don't make roti bakar. This is professional speakers who learn how to speak on stage, how to moderate, how to speak in front of a large crowd. So I bring up those two different things, both the middle child and also the Toastmasters, because for one, I believe very much in equality. So I would like to share the time properly. And also for Toastmasters, what we learn is, whenever somebody tends to go over their speaking time limit, we will raise two cards. Normally it's going to be yellow and a red card. So yellow is a soft stop, and red is a hard stop. Since I don't have yellow and red today, and blue is CAS's official corporate colors, I have light blue and dark blue. So light blue means that you guys have about a minute left. And dark blue means it's time to wrap it up before Rishi starts playing music. Let's have a very engaging session. All right. So for today, we are talking about panel one, One Vision, One Digital Economy, Unlocking ASEAN's AI Potential Through Collaboration. We're joined by three brilliant minds driving change across policy, national strategy, and the AI startup ecosystem. So first of all, on my far right, we have Failina Said. She currently holds the Director of Cyber and Technology Policy at ISIS Malaysia. Failina leads policy research at the intersection of emerging technologies and national security, with a strong focus on cybersecurity governance. In the middle here, we have Mr. Koen Munike. Koen is the co-founder and CEO of Ara Research AI, Kern brings startup insight into AI automation and productivity, having developed intelligent systems that streamline payment collections through WhatsApp and email. So all of those Shopee WhatsApp messages, I think, future, yes, to pay your bill. And on my right over here, we have Mr. Shamsul Izhan Abdul Majid. I believe you go by the name Sam Majid, right? So we have Sam Majid over here. He is the head of the National AI Office. He gave a very inspiring speech just now. And he also played a role in shaping Malaysia's AI roadmap and digital economy policy. So now for the three of you, if you would care to give a short introduction, starting with Sam.
Okay. Once again, thank you for having National AI Office. And maybe to start off, I am not the middle child. I'm not the first child. I'm the only child.
Explains a lot.
So I suppose being an only child, you get the extreme of both ends. Happy to be here, and AI is such an important topic that the government established the National AI Office to be the focal point of driving AI adoption, AI safeguards, and also bringing all of us together on that journey. So I'll stop there and be fair to my other panelists.
Before you get the red card. Oh, okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this opportunity to actually bring us on the stage to talk about a topic that I think is quite exciting. I think for some people, it can actually cause your heart to palpitate a bit, because whenever anybody thinks about AI, the idea of Terminator probably comes to mind. Or sometimes there's the question about which is the first movie that comes to mind when you think about AI. And usually it has interesting and diverse examples when you actually look at popular culture. But if we actually do think about AI in its own, as how it has actually developed in society, or how it has actually been utilized, all the way from image recognition to chatbots to how it has actually assisted with productivity. I think the advent of something like ChatGPT shows how it can actually really assist when someone is actually trying to unveil productivity in their own workspace. So in that sense, there's actually a lot of potential for it. And I think in one of our papers, so I'm from the Institute of Strategic and International Studies, Malaysia, and we usually look into geostrategic, geoeconomic, as well as national issues of national interest. So last year, we actually penned a paper with My Digital on the future of AI governance, because we actually do see that there is actually an interplay of international governance systems, as well as national domestic industry interests that would either clash or they would actually complement with each other very well. So in that sense, some of the key takeaways is that we actually do need to prepare our governance systems. We actually do need to also prepare our technology and industry systems, innovation and research, and actually find a way to streamline with a lot of international processes. So that would actually be where I stop. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Farlina. And to Kern.
Hi, my name is Koen, the co-founder and CEO of Our Research AI. I'm honored to be here, actually. I met you at a previous event and asked to speak here, and I'm humbled by the people around me. On my side, what I like to bring today is I am building AI technology in Malaysia today. I don't pretend to be a regional policy expert. I have great minds around me that are that. But I've been building technology for over a decade. And interestingly, my background, which was academically actually in social sciences, is never more relevant than it is today. The interaction of people with AI is dependent on people knowing themselves, developing themselves as individuals, and then steering technology successfully. And I think my side, I'm happy to talk about my technology, about my company, all these things. But I'm so grateful that I am 41 when this is happening. And I'm so grateful that I got to study social sciences in Hong Kong, Korea, here, around the region. And was lucky enough in 2018 to be brought to Malaysia by the Gap Magic program back then to Jaya, which opened me up to Malaysia and all its diversity. And I'm happy to talk today a bit about actually implementing AI, the societal impacts of AI, and I'll also be very candid about my opinions. I look around this room, it's a very serious room, and normally I'm in a startup sort of environment where we say outlandish things more often than probably we should. But this morning, I was choosing between a batik shirt and this outfit, and I thought to myself, I don't want to appropriate too much. I want to stand out in the sense that I am an outsider looking in. And I hope to share some insights and some thoughts about the challenges that I see that might not always be fun to hear, but at least it's my individual opinion. And I hope to help the debate in that way. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Kuhn, right?
Yes.
Yes. Sorry, I'm giving you the German pronunciation.
My name is always butchered. It's fine. You can call me whichever way you want. Just point towards my direction.
No problem. Okay, Kuhn. So you are Dutch, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so just for whoever has not been to Holland before, or whoever has not been to the Netherlands and have Dutch friends, the Dutch tend to be very straightforward, very honest people, which sometimes I'm guessing in the region can be a bit jarring. We'll come more to that later, and I'm hoping for your honest, direct feedback. I think everybody in the room would find direct feedback a bit refreshing, rather than beating around the bush. All right. So starting off on our first question. This is for everybody on the panel. And now you said, Kuhn, just now you were saying that you focus more on the startup culture and you're not so big on the regional aspects of AI and how it affects ASEAN. So we'll go from the macro down to the micro. Starting with the macro. The first question is, ASEAN is often described as fragmented when it comes to digital governance. What are the practical opportunities for greater collaboration among ASEAN countries in AI? So I'm giving this first off to Farlina and also Sam. Ladies first, or?
Thank you so much. I will actually try, and I'll probably also raise some interesting ideas which can be refuted by anyone in the room and also by anyone in the panel if there's actually any, if you would actually care to share. So some interesting things that we actually look at when we think about governance in the region. Once upon a time, perhaps when we actually do think about fragmentation, for instance, data governance models, and you would actually see some folks actually looking at things like data localization versus data cross-border data flows. There would actually be preferences and fragmentation in some models that countries would actually prefer. But today, I think some of the literature, after many years of digitization, especially post-pandemic, you actually find that there's more conversations on ASEAN platform to actually try to actually converge a lot of these little details so that you would actually be able to approach it in terms of the market that ASEAN actually hopes to present to be. And over here, I think there are various documents that you actually find that actually speaks about a data governance framework, for instance, that was actually introduced, I think, in around 2017 to 2018, or even when you actually look at the recent ASEAN-related AI documents on generative AI, responsible AI use, and ethics and governance. So in that sense, I think some of the ideas that we actually do see when it comes to policies for for governance, fragmentation when it comes to governance in digitization can be some nuances that has to look absolutely into the details. But I think in terms of principles, a lot of ASEAN countries are actually converging in a specific place. So that's actually where I think it would actually contravene some of the ideas that folks would actually have in the room. But I think there are actually also the fragmentation that actually occurs can be because of the varying development standards that you actually, development status that you actually do see in ASEAN. For instance, in countries that actually do have different infrastructure, they may actually have to face different types of either threat actors, or they would actually have to come up with different types of policies to actually address the maturity of deployment of AI or any types of digitization in their ecosystems. So in that sense, you actually find that there are some countries that are actually faster, while some countries that would actually be a lot slower when it comes to developing some of these policies. But in principles, if we were to actually take a look at some of the conversation that has actually occurred in ASEAN, I would actually say that the fragmentation is not as fragmented as we think it is. It is fragmented because of infrastructure. It is fragmented because there are some countries where the deployment has actually been more matured, but otherwise it is actually moving in a single direction. So that would actually be where I would actually see it.
Thank you, Farlina. And over to Sam.
Yeah, so if I just extend that on a few more things. So at my keynote earlier, I mentioned that ASEAN stands to develop additional GDP boosts should all of ASEAN work together. And the GDP boost is due to the capability or the potential of what AI is bringing to the region. 10 to 18% GDP, that's one of them, $1 trillion uplift by 2030, improve infrastructure, healthcare, disaster response, and also the collaboration when it comes to real-time data exchange cross-border. But also maybe to go a little bit more deeper is when it comes to AI specifically is the setting up of the AI safety network where all 10 countries collaborate in months to come. And this comes in the perspective of how would each country understand what AI safety means. So it's similar to how each of us, when we look at a car, a vehicle, and we understand what safety means, how many airbags, how many brakes, how many safety systems. So it's the same as AI as well. But the bit that I maybe want to bring to the another dimension why safety is such a crucial element for ASEAN countries to work closely is because the amount of investment that's coming in by many sources, that's building up a lot of new AI capabilities that we have yet to see. So you and I have seen many of the capabilities that's about AI augmenting human capability from, for example, Gen AI when it first came out 2-3 years ago. It's more of you type in a text, a message, prompt engineering, and it will reply you in text. But now, 2.5 years later, you type in a text, it can do many more things. It can make you a long video. It can be an agent on your behalf, what we call agentic AI, which it can do things on your behalf. And this is in the span of 2 years. And the last 18 months, the amount of investment that's going in, we will see many more scenarios and capability that we have yet to see now. So therefore, it's a moving target. So therefore, to understand what safety means is also a moving target, but it needs to be localized somehow for each country. And then we also have we also have the fundamental of what AI is, which are 3 main things. Number one, the infrastructure itself. We're talking about GPU, we're talking about data centers, and these are somewhat localized in the country, like Johor and others are concentrating a lot of or attracting a lot of investment into AI. Number 2 is the algorithm/model, which we know of or we heard of, OpenAI, open source, Gwen, DeepSeek. That's the second part. And the third part is data. So, and the philosophy behind data, again, from an ASEAN perspective is, do you bring the data to the AI or do you bring the AI to the data? Maybe there's certain mindset that needs to be positioned based on countries, based on sectors, based on use case, especially when a lot of the investment and capability and ownership are not in your hands. Data is in your hands, you are the owner, but are you the owner of the model? And are you the owner of the GPU/data center? So this goes back to that need for cross-collaboration, which needs to happen, especially when each country has more maturity when it comes to enforcement, when it comes to their acts and regulation, and the collaboration when it comes to partnership to safeguard societies and communities of ASEAN.
Thank you much, Sam. I was about to pull out my blue book right here, but it's okay. It was a very interesting time. Yeah, it was a very informative answer. Coming back to what you just said just now, and also to your speech, that it's a collaborated effort here in ASEAN, and not only that, but it's also should ASEAN collaborate if countries decide to collaborate together. What hindrances do we actually have in that besides the different technological aspects? So we have different countries advancing faster than others. Besides that, what are the workarounds behind that? How can we actually come together? And with the rapid pace that AI is going at nowadays, are we too slow in actually coming up with the regulations? This is either to you or Farlina.
Farinda, go first.
Okay. Let's actually try to set the stage. Also, I have a very interesting view, I think, when it comes to whether we are actually too slow when it comes to regulations, because to a certain extent, some part of regulating AI is a socio-technical domain. So then that means you actually do have to see technical possibilities on how you actually regulate it. The second is you actually do understand the impact that it actually has on society. And some of these, if people are actually grappling with their imaginations on trying to imagine how things actually look like in the future, it can actually be you can come up with regulations that would be ill-fitting or that would actually over-regulate, and that's actually some of the challenges that regulators, I think, would face when when you're trying to regulate this type of environment. I think one core area of the integration that we are actually looking at is actually infrastructure, as you actually mentioned. But I think when we are looking at some parts of governance, there are usually two ways of looking at it. One is the what, the second is the how. So what usually looks at your acts, your principles, the exact letter of the law to actually see whether it actually resonates with each other. The second is the how. And I think that's where when some of the details when it comes to your multi-stakeholder processes, as Sam mentioned earlier, who owns the data? Would actually each country have the same governance structure or same ownership interpretation? Would that actually be some of the things that ASEAN would harmonize towards? Or could they actually classify data in a completely different way? Hence, I would actually regard this as absolutely sensitive data, hence it should actually stay within the country, or would I actually not? And that could differ from my peers, for instance. So some of these are actually the details that would affect, I think, the regional integration that we actually do see when it comes to further ASEAN AI approaches. So that would be some thoughts.
Okay, thank you. Kuhn, sorry. As an outsider looking into Malaysia and also in ASEAN, what's your view behind regulation here? I mean, I know that's not your forte, but just for your first few months here, how has that felt?
Well, to sort of continue on what my esteemed neighbors were saying, I think we can all to some extent agree, at least that AI is very much a private company-driven process, like the evolution and the speed at which it's going is primarily coming out of the private sector. And on an ASEAN level, I would say then it's partially an AI question, but it's partially also a question of how do you grow business across the region quickly? Because independently, markets in ASEAN are too small. If I talk to my VCs and I would say I am building a company in Malaysia, they would give me no money. If I talk to my VCs and say only in Singapore, they would give me no money. Maybe if I say Indonesia, yeah, because it's a big market. So if I look at building businesses that are size-wise sort of really going to make a difference, they have the amount of capital to either have amazing multi-agent frameworks or develop their own LLMs or all these kind of things, right? You need a regional platform for businesses to grow. And that is almost beyond AI. So when I think about data localization and regionalization, we have conversations where we work with banks, and banks want their data to be in Malaysia. But then when we talk to regional or global providers of cloud infrastructure, I think some of them are here now, but last year it was like, yeah, we're almost there. So we end up with local providers that have, generally speaking, less easy to integrate infrastructure to work with. They are not the Amazons of this world, the Google Clouds of this world, and they are all in the process of localizing into Malaysia and I'm sure other markets. But in absence of, for example, a framework where you have some sort of regional agreement of how you store data, so it's easy for small and big companies to expand, you end up with really big companies that essentially have sub-companies everywhere because it's not possible to run it on a higher level. Right, so that's one thing. The same thing is about payment infrastructure. The same question, like if you are doing payments in multiple countries, you always end up on a lot of different payment gateways and such. And if you want to grow an AI business, you need to get paid. And if you want to get paid, you need payment gateways. So the question is, when I talk to my VCs, they say, yeah, it's very hard to do a lot of countries in ASEAN because of that discrepancy between markets in the basic business fundamentals. And then you have other questions about, for example, performance of LLM models across more niche languages in the written form, right? Like we work 97% with Bahasa Melayu, and then Bahasa Indonesia is easy to do. But if I go to, for example, Vietnam or Thailand, the LLM models might not perform. So what about like a regional LLM model that actually covers Asian languages, or at least Southeast Asian languages really well? Because the reason, and that's my last point before a booklet comes out, the reason that companies go to the European Union, they go to the US, to some extent maybe to China, is because it's a huge market that you can address in somewhat of one swoop. But in ASEAN, that is just not the case. So if I want to go to another country, I really have to think about it. I mean, I know some guys that are running like some of the biggest payment gateways or AI companies in the region, and they have completely separated code bases per country because it's just so different. In other words, it's like 8 different companies in one. So how do you bridge that? Because I think there's huge potential in the region, obviously. I hope that was something.
No, that's an excellent answer. And I think we have, so MIM, if I'm not mistaken, you guys have a lot of partners who are also, your main focus would be SMEs, if I'm not mistaken. So SMEs here, I think this is vital information for them to also understand when they reach out into AI. And I think it's very clear, it's very straightforward information, so that in case we do want to grow here in this country, we don't just remain local. We have to think about how do we grow global. So first we start off with ASEAN, we start off with our neighbors, and then after that we will eventually reach off into the other markets like China, Europe, and the US. So thank you for that one as well. Now, coming back to ASEAN, we have a lot of smaller countries, and how do we ensure that the smaller regions are not left behind? Sam, would you like to take that one?
Sure. Maybe I'll touch upon a few things just to echo the other two panelists. So smaller or bigger, it means that they have an opportunity to collaborate, and where I'm going to go into perhaps in 2 things that I would like the audience to appreciate. Number one is the appreciation of a typical AI scenario that happens to individuals or society. Before AI was in the picture, or before AI was really widespread in the picture, social media was the hot thing. And you probably know when it comes to misuse of social media. And if I can go into a little bit deeper, misuse of social media typically means that there is a bad actor, perhaps in one country. The tool, which is the social media platform, is hosted in another country, and the victim is here. So it's a nightmare for enforcement people, because it's like the gun that shot the victim is like not there, it's like another country, and the bad guy is in another country. So that's why regulation needs to be harmonized. Collaboration between enforcement people, between the domestic and regional needs to be performed, because businesses and platforms are becoming more and more borderless, like what I mentioned. And now when you put AI in that ecosystem where you have, like I repeat again, the bad guy in one country, the tool, social media platform or our IT platform in another country, now you have AI in another country, could be a smaller country. So we have 4 or 5 different moving parts in a simple ChatGPT conversation. So when bad things happen, people are trying to scratch their heads. Do we have acts and regulation to go to the other country to talk to the perpetrator, to find evidence in the tool, and to also figure out this AI, who developed the AI, is the AI a black box, why did the AI decide or perform in this way? So that's a typical scenario that I envisage will be more and more in the ecosystem. However, to kind of bring people to a same level playing field, especially when it comes to countries, I emphasize back on the availability of creating standards. Standards are really crucial because as a start, we have United Nations and ISO and IEEE at the international level, where members of the international community work on different things when it comes to standards. So case in point is just how simple the 240 volt 60 hertz power socket at your house is based on the standard. Without that standard, you probably get electrocuted when you plug in a non-standard to your area. It could be standard to where you come from, but not in your area, in where you are living. So there is a need for a more Malaysia standard MS, Malaysia domesticated standard, that either is created domestically, either created regionally based on regional engagement, or either created from internationally, ISO, for example. Last week or last few days, a new standard just came out in the AI space called 42005, which NIO will try to bring as part of the Malaysia ecosystem standard. But that's part of one of many other standards that we need to build for Malaysia. So why is this important? If the other countries are doing the same, then at least we have some common playing field. We can talk chicken to chicken rather than chicken and duck. We are talking on the same standards. That's number one. Number two, when SMEs purchase tools, you can use these standards as a procurement checklist. That means when you buy a tool and then, does this comply to this standard, that standard, and so on standard? And if better, those standards are local standards, rather than, you're trying to say, does this comply to a Japan standard or US standard? Well, we live in Malaysia, so it needs to be complying to Malaysia standards. But does the standard exist? That's the question. So today, as of today, Malaysia's standard for AI, none, zero, none. We have to run really quick to bring members of the community, the vendors, the technology suppliers, the research and development guys, because standard creation is a community-driven, it's not a government-led. It needs to be by practitioners to come in and build as many standards as possible. Standards for LLM, standards for localization, standards for procurement, in the space and in the domain of AI. So government has created under Jabatan Standard Malaysia many technical committees looking at different things, and the newest baby is Technical Committee 17 for AI, which was set up last year. But to set up a committee is one thing, but to have the committee sit down like this is another thing. So we got to bring more members into this committee, and if you guys want to be part of that, you are much welcome, so that then we can develop more and more, perhaps management standard, risk standard, auditing standard, when it comes to domestic AI adoption. If we do that, and I'm very sure the other countries of ASEAN will hear about it, then we can echo something common, especially when some of the standards you don't need to create from scratch. Adopt what's already done by British Standards Institute, BSI, ISO, IEEE, or ITU as a global framework that can be cascaded down domestically.
Thank you so much, Sam. Okay, coming back to your standards as well, so I'm going to focus on Farlina now. So the fun fact, the first time Farlina and I met, this was about a year ago, and we were talking about AI, and she said to me, she was talking about LLMs. Do you guys know what LLMs are? Show of hands? LLM for AI? Okay. So when she said to me LLM, and she was talking about languages which are being used, I immediately thought about masters in law, which is also an LLM. And I thought, well, here in Malaysia, it'll probably be English. And I was completely wrong. And then she made me read her paper on AI policy.
I'm so sorry I did that.
It's okay. It's a very interesting paper.
Okay.
So coming back to you now, and also the standards which Sam was just talking about, how difficult, because just now you gave the example of the different plug points that we use in the region. So Malaysia has a 3-pin. If you go off to, I think, Philippines, they use a 2-pin. So for these types of standards and regulations, how difficult is it actually for us as a region to collaborate together and come up with an ASEAN standard? Or is the goal for each country to come up with its own standard, which then meets a minimum line, for example?
I think there are certain things that we would, so there are some things that are actually very, very, very nitty-gritty, because for instance, I think some of the international conversations, when you actually think about standard setting, can be very specific to the point that certain things can't be done because our infrastructure actually looks like this, so we cannot actually, we can't harmonize with whatever you actually have, or we can't adopt what you have because it doesn't fit in very well. So I think in the case of LLMs, some of the concerns that we actually do have can be actually internationally harmonized. For instance, if you actually have a process on how to ensure that there are actually safe developments or safety by design for LLMs, then you would actually have certain steps, which everybody now, even in cybersecurity, you will adopt something like the NIST framework, for instance. So you would actually adopt a framework. This is actually how we're going to manage it. And if it actually harmonizes with your neighbor, it would actually fit into the idea of how you could actually tackle and address different problems. But I think there are certain things when you think about biases, when you think about the social impact of some of these LLMs, that would make it very a bit cultural reflective. And I think in that sense, that's where if for instance, we are all trying to agree on a definition of social harms, on harms in cyberspace. I think the ASEAN Ministerial Committee for Information, AMRI, I think Regulations and Information, AMRI, has actually been trying to converse on different types of categorization for online harms. And it can be very difficult because one country would actually say online gambling is considered an online harm, while another country would be, no, online gambling is actually, it's fine because it doesn't contravene with any types of beliefs that we actually share. So in that sense, the social aspect, I think, of the AI being deployed would actually cause different interpretations on what people actually find problematic and not. And I think that's where setting the standards that meet some of these social issues would be where we would have to come up with an understanding. Where is the baseline that we are working with? I think because handling AI is a diverse range of things, so you have your cybersecurity end of it, you have your data governance end of it, you actually have your harms end of it. So because there are actually all these diverse areas, you can find that there can be commonalities, I think, with some, because a technical system should look like a technical system. I mean, we should all understand that the plug point would actually look like a plug point, and the purpose of the plug point might be to deliver electricity. Whether the shape of the plug point can actually be different, but certain types of harmonization could actually occur as long as you actually understand the principle behind it, I think. It may actually not make it easy to scale, I think, as Kun has actually raised earlier, that some of these tiny details will actually get in the way of a company who's actually probably planning to set up in Cambodia and actually thinking, I'm just going to distribute this exact LLM all the way to Malaysia. And like you said, the language would actually be problematic. So I think I wish to actually revert back to the question that you had earlier. How do you actually ensure inclusive growth for all ASEAN? Because some of the pain points can be talent. Some of the pain points can actually be the capabilities that these talents actually, the availability of the talents, the capability of the talents. And I think something that Malaysia perhaps have not looked much at is intra-ASEAN cyber capacity building for something like AI, or for something like for anything that is technical with AI, I think. Because with cybersecurity, we do export some of our capabilities, especially when it comes to the AP certs, for instance, or OIC certs. But for something like AI, building innovation in AI, or building digitization, I think there is actually greater activity from our neighbor like Singapore. Singapore would actually go into places like Cambodia to actually introduce some of these programs, to actually build capacity of like the businessmen and the digital community there. Well, somebody also, please correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like that I see lesser footprint, I think, for Malaysia in that sense. So I think going back to the fact that our intra-ASEAN development should actually be increasing, I think since the previous ASEAN Economic Community Vision was actually placed in 2015, now it's actually coming up to maturity, and we're looking at ASEAN Vision 2045. The intra-ASEAN relationship could be stronger. So that's it.
Thank you so much, Verlina. Okay, you mentioned Kun just now as well. So Kun, you moved to Malaysia. You started up a company over here, and what type of barriers did you face when trying to start up a company here in Malaysia? Be as brutal and as honest as possible. I think, but be kind. You can be honest, but you can also be kind.
This is the Dutch filter, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
A Dutch filter, but for Malaysia.
Yeah.
So tell us what your journey was like and
Sure.
where improvements can be made.
Do you mind if I say a few things about the last question? As
Yes,
well?
please.
So I think one of the things, just 3 points I wanted to add, or two. A while back, a close friend of mine is very much connected to the AI infrastructure in Singapore. So I went there. He asked me to come over because there was a new ISO standard in Singapore that was being launched. Sadly, compared to the gentleman next to me, I don't know the actual number, but it was the general an ISO certification for AI. And the speaker was actually the chief research officer, I think, of Changi Airport. And he was saying, oh, this ISO standard is so great, and look at all these steps inside. It was a whole biblical length document. And when I see these kind of things, I think to myself, obviously, like the large providers of LLMs, they should be held to these structures. They should adjust their LLMs and the infrastructure around it to certain standards. And there should definitely be procurement standards as well. But I also think that if you want small businesses to use AI to solve problems, you need to have some sort of pilot level procurement standard where you say, and a skill level procurement standard. And why do I say that is because the technology moves so fast. And if you are going to try to write procurement standards for everything in order for it to get generally adopted versus like pilot level adoption, you get in a lot of trouble because by the time those procurement standards are there, implemented properly, the technology has already moved a lot. So I think pilot level is really important. And the other thing as well, which I find very interesting, and I don't really have an answer to, but just as a thought, the interesting thing as well in the phase where we are right now in human development, I would say, is that in the past, if a car didn't meet safety standards, you wouldn't allow it to be sold or imported, and you could just control those things quite well. The interesting thing here is that you're trying to build standards while anybody with AI, with internet and a VPN, irrespective of the country you're in, can access LLMs. And when it comes to, and I find the value conversation super interesting to me, when you have local standard, regional standard, etc. The problem is that these LLMs that people use are going to be the smartest, the fastest, and the most affordable LLMs. And if you have internet and you have a VPN, you can access them. So the question of localizing standards for what, for example, in certain countries, you cannot talk about certain squares and certain uprisings because DeepSeek doesn't talk to you about it. But technically speaking, with the VPN and the internet, you can access that information anyway, and people will go toward the models that are the fastest and give the best answers. So I find it very interesting, the conversation, and it definitely needs to be had about these standards. But how do you write standards of things that you can access directly through the internet without any middleman or government or middlewoman for that matter? So yeah, that was on those points. So I think setting up in Malaysia, to come back to you, I mean, it was very interesting. I got here first in 2018. And honestly, the idea of the magic program in Jaya, which now has changed name to something, I mean, their goal was to get foreign tech startups to come to Malaysia and then hopefully hire local people. Exactly what we did. And it was a really interesting experience for us to come to Malaysia. I think Malaysia has a big market, there's big opportunity. And I also think that like on the consumer level, there's quite a lot of tech adoption, which is interesting, especially on the e-commerce side of things. On the challenges, I think that now comes in the political. Yeah. So, no, I think on the challenges side, if I'm honest, I think one of the things in Malaysia that I experience until this day, and maybe not unique to Malaysia necessarily, but I've experienced it here, is that essentially people, there's a lot of SMEs and MSMEs that are very much in the status quo. They make profit, they have their customers, but they're not necessarily looking outwards or wanting to exponentially grow their business. They are comfortable where they are, and the owners will say, well, I'm retiring in 5 or 10 years. Unless you can show me from the moment that you show me the software that I'm going to save money, make money, they're just like, it's okay lah. You know, I think that is sort of, and there are multiple structural parts of Malaysia, in my opinion. See, I'm going to say something unacceptable, oil and gas, that makes a certain level of comfort, right? There is money, there is support for people to just essentially coast somewhat. But that also means that like you don't adopt technology as quickly because you can just coast. And I think that's what I see on my side, is that like the upside has to be so clear. And when it comes to technology adoption, which might sound like a side path, I think one of the problems is also the administrational debt in SMEs and MSMEs. And I was talking to a Datin once, and she said something very profound to me. She said to me, Koen, the problem is not digitization, it's digitize. And what she meant by that was like a lot of SMEs and MSMEs, the admin side of things, of how they store their data, is extremely messy. So the adoption of any type of technology, including AI, is difficult because you also have to reckon with the administrational debt that your company has before you can even get an API or you can integrate. So I think those are challenges definitely that companies have to accept their past admin issues to also move forward with new technology. And I think that is a major issue.
Thank you so much, Koen. So a lot of the SMEs in the room today, we have to move fast. I mean, nothing is going to stop for AI. It's already evolving past anything that people can comprehend. Who knows what level it is at right now? So if you have an SME, if you wish to digitalize, then you must digitize first, if I understood that correctly.
Yeah, it's very important that you start structuring the data that goes to your company properly, whether that be an ERP, a CRM, something along these lines, because if you don't start that process, it's just hard to integrate with any technology and move at the pace that you would want to, because you shouldn't, this is going to sound very basic, but don't use an Excel sheet like the Word document. Like, that's so common and super hard to do anything with as a tech company.
That's a very good line. Don't use your Excel sheet as a Word document. How many in the room today use ChatGPT? How many in the room today use DeepSeek? Okay, so we have quite a number in the room here today. And what we have to realize is that ChatGPT is not only about making images of, your friends as cows, for example. It can be used for so much more. It can be used for automation. We're going to touch a bit, just very shortly, since you're on here and you're an SME. I'm going to give you about a minute to tell us about your startup. But then after that, I think we can also have the QR code for questions. We will also open up the floor to questions for the next 20 minutes or so. So there's also a Slido. So if you scan in the QR code for Slido, you can also pose your questions over there if you're too shy to come up to the microphone. But in the meantime, Koen, tell us a little bit about your startup.
I love it. I'm sorry, I'm the Q&A filler. I like that. So my company is a fintech company. We are what you call a B2B2C company. We make software for other businesses to work with consumers. And essentially what we do is we help companies collect payments from consumers ethically, properly, without all the horror stories that you hear across the region and in Malaysia. So essentially we do empathetic collections powered by Gen AI, and we do that specifically through text messaging, because people are increasingly uncomfortable with synchronous communication, which means calling, talking face-to-face, because of all the social media questions and such as well. So what we do is we provide actually an empathetic platform where multiple AI agents specialize in specific parts of the collection process So that can be a negotiator that is trained based on FBI negotiation strategies, for example, to help people by empathizing with their situation. So for example, I have no money, I cannot pay anything. And then the AI agent, first of all, hears them, empathizes with them, and then tries to get them to a micro repayment plan, for example, that allows them to pay 10 ringgit per week because it's all payment gateway integrated and such. So you allow people to move out of debt and get forward in life, and AI or generative AI gives you the time and the attention on a daily basis, if need be, to help you get in that direction, because there is a huge problem in Malaysia which is related to financial literacy, especially of the lower part economically of the country. And people are, there is so many ways with lending, loan sharks, all these things that people do not have, they don't run a TNC through a GPT and say, hey, is this predatory? I did that with recently with one of those e-commerce platforms. They gave me insurance, and I ran their TNC through a GPT, and they say 7 out of 10. This is a predatory sort of insurance policy. People don't think about those things, and as a result, they get into debts, and they don't know how to get out. And our AI have talked to people that were talking about committing suicide, and trying to be supportive, helpful, and provide them options to get out. And the reality is the economics of collection is a person is a number, a person needs to pay, and if they don't pay, we'll give it to a debt collection agency. And God knows what a debt collection agency does. So AI can do those things better.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I recently went off to this AI event hosted by SciTech, and they basically were talking about AI bot agents, and how the bot agents would then communicate in the company themselves, between your finance team to your HR team to the sales team, and it's moving at such a pace. It's insane, and I'm glad that you've come up with something like that to actually help people get out of debt, which is somewhat similar to a topic that we had with MIM last year as well. Coming to the questions, so we open the floor to questions now. If anybody would like to go up to the mic, please go ahead. If not, the first question that we have on Slido is from Dr. Vic Naye. We'll go with this question first, and then we'll come to you. So he is from the Cornell Leadership Academy. Encik Shamsul, so Sam, what role can universities play in standardizing AI education and capacity building across ASEAN to support a unified digital economy?
Yeah, so thank you for having a question coming from the academia, because I feel it's a really big elephant in the room that needs to be brought into the fold. So before I say that, LLM, before the word LLM came into Malaysia, into our Malaysian cognitive mind, it used to be more popular with Lembaga Lebuh Raya Malaysia, LLM. Highway business. So you see signboards in Bangi area, you see LLM pointing that way. So, but now today, LLM stands for Large Language Model. And the reason why I bring that up was because last week, and this will echo to the academic question. Last week, we had the pleasure of hosting the Allen Turing Award winner, recipient, Dr. Richard Sutton. He created reinforced learning, which is the fundamental of most Gen AI. He won the Turing Award, which is like the Nobel Prize Award for that industry, for the AI industry. And he highlighted a few things that us as humanities need to be aware of. Number one, LLM is not the last thing you will see coming from the AI business, AI ecosystem. There's a lot more coming in terms of new features, new tools, new fundamental tools, if I can say that word, fundamental. Because on top of AI, there are other tools, there are startups that are using it to build their customer-facing, business-facing, citizen-facing, but behind it are these fundamental tools like LLM. And 99.9% of large language models that are being used in Malaysia are not from Malaysia. They are developed by institutions, by academicians, by commercial entities, and they are used for many use cases. But again, they are not made in Malaysia. And I have to emphasize that because this is where research and development must play their role. Obviously funded by in some way, but they don't need to boil the ocean. So public university, private university, can step up, but stepping up in terms of doing it in a very strategic way, solving today's society issues, rather than just doing it for the sake of doing it. So we have this other paradigm where if you don't want LLM, you can go for SLM, small language model, lesser parameters that can run on smaller devices. You don't need a big, massive server. You can run on an offline, old computer. But again, we need local research and development ecosystem to step up, to be closer to the commercial guys in this room, to be closer to the policymakers, and start to highlight on how other untapped potentials of our ecosystem AI can solve, but fundamentally AI that has roots coming from Malaysia. So that ties together with our research, our local research on psychology, local research on language, which is not just Bahasa Melayu or English, but many more nuances and dialects of our local ecosystem. In Sarawak, they set up last month an equivalent of NIO, but state-based Sarawak AI Center, which we work closely because they want to focus on their language dialects, Iban, Kadazan. They want to focus on the use of LLM for agriculture, fisheries, which they have, and also oil and gas. And also, these are part of where they want their long-term view and journey of where their society can go. So, if I can give you the importance of why local research and development must step up, in the context of Bahasa Malaysia, where it's the formal language of Malaysia, and if there isn't enough corpus, authoritative Bahasa language being fed into an AI system, if there isn't enough, then you'll find that our young generation, when they interact with an AI system, the reply, first they type in the language, but the reply may not be Bahasa Malaysia. It might largely be Bahasa Indonesia. Because the corpus of Bahasa Indonesia, the adoption of Bahasa Indonesia in LM is much larger. Can't blame Indonesians for that. But we just got to ask ourselves, what are we doing domestically? What are we doing more that we haven't done? So this is where research and development must come in, because it's not just the data sets that we're feeding in, which is in the hands of all of you, which is like, if you are the owner of the data, you should know whether you should feed your data to AI or not. But the second one is the developer of, or the creator of language models. We have none from Malaysia. We are using, most of them are coming from off the shelf.
Thank you, Sam. I was just about to reach for the book as well.
Sorry.
No, we're doing quite well on time, actually. So that's the German side of things as well. The question over there to the front. Yes, please state your name and also where you're from and your question and who it's directed to.
My name is Bharat, very much Malaysian. I think we in the room are very privileged because we are informed, but many don't have this privilege. So my question is actually regarding safety. In a world where there's increasing trust deficit and accelerating AI, are we doing enough to educate the public, both for their financial well-being and overall well-being? And personally, from my experience, most of my problem has been solved when I talk to a human being. Try pressing 1, try pressing 2, 3, 4, and 5. But finally, if you get the privilege of speaking to a human being, the problem is solved much faster. And I think the future, talking to a human being is going to be a luxury and a premium, and you might have to pay for it. So are we ready? What are we doing to make sure that AI is not a cause for anxiety, but a cause for well-being? Thank you.
Thank you, Bharat. I think I'm going to direct that one to both Farlina and Koen. So Farlina, you first.
Actually, I would be curious to what. I would be curious to what Koen actually has to say. I think it's an interesting model that actually applies to.
I thought I'd say ladies first and pass off this hot potato, but it's not going to work today. I think it's a really good question and a really important question. And I have very, very contradictive ideas about this, to be honest. I think the biggest challenge of using AI properly is to be a better human. And that is so much more work than asking an AI who you're supposed to be. So in a nutshell, what I personally think is that if governments could find a way to not let kids use AI till they're 16, I would support it, personally. Because you need to also develop yourself before you can critically respond to an AI. So for me, I partially agree with the gentleman, right? Today, I knew that some questions for this panel were actually prepared. And so I actually talked to an AI for an hour about that. But I also say to my AI, you have an IQ of 180, disagree with me, and say that this, what you are now proposing is a really bad reason, and tell me why. But that is the outcome of academic studies, critical thinking by yourself, and also learning from other people. I think people are wired to learn from people, and from that baseline, you can use AI to have a critical PA constantly. And I think that is a real problem. And in a way, I'll give you a funny or an interesting example of the problems. And it also even comes back to the academia question. I had a software engineer in my company. And he said to me, Koen, I want to be better at managing people. So I said, hey, funnily enough, read a book called Crucial Conversations, which is actually the title of this talk. And it's a book about how you communicate empathetically with people. So the person then suddenly started in conversation seeing the word I all the time. And I said to him, like, why are you saying I all the time? Well, that's what the book told me. And I said, did you read the book? And he said, no, I read chapter 1 and AI told me the rest. And it turned out that the book actually said, I believe or I feel allows people to safely share with you. But if you just say I, you sound like an egocentric maniac, right? And I think it is so important for that friction between people to exist, right? It's scary to talk to people sometimes, but that also makes you better at speaking. And so in academia, I think that friction is so important, because if I ask anybody right now, can you give me the 10 rules of making a best tech startup in Malaysia? GPT will tell you, but you don't know if it's true or not. Software engineers are writing code that they don't understand themselves unless you ask what they're writing, because they don't have the experience. Right? So I'm not sure how academia is also supposed to bridge that gap, but I am not worried about elderly people in LLMs. I'm more worried about young people. If you come out of university and you want to do an internship, why would I pay an intern for something an LLM can do better as an extension of a senior software engineer? Our VCs say, hire less and 100x the people you have. So where do the young people go? I don't have an answer, but I agree with you. Human interaction is so important. LLMs can be good if you're good at criticizing yourself and asking critical questions, but that is very hard, and that's much harder than talking to an LLM.
I think being self-critical of yourself, that's just as a human without even the AI aspect of it, to actually think, oh, maybe I'm not the best one out there, maybe I do have flaws. I mean, that's something that's been going on for humanity since the beginning of time, probably. And now asking AI and actually being honest and frank with an AI LLM, that's also a huge challenge.
But if I can add one more thing, which is a funny example. Like, I was reading on LinkedIn a while back, and then there was a prompt saying, oh, this is the best prompt you can have as a CEO to be a better CEO. So I created an AI agent for myself, and I put that prompt in. And that AI was such a douchebag.
Oh no.
I would say something and it says, oh, Koen, you don't know what you're talking about. You clearly need to think harder about your life. And I was like, I got so depressed whenever I talked to that AI. But I guess for that particular person, it worked, right? And one thing I want to add to you, right? It's also about critical questions about how good you might be or not be, but also having reinforcement that you are not that bad. I think that, like social media, which came up before with Sam, it constantly reinforces negative things on people because it sells, right? And that's one thing that I always miss in this conversation, which actually is really important. What is the economic driving force of an AI company is much more important. How does an AI make money shapes how the AI performs as well. So I think actually NGOs, government organizations, non-for-profit companies are very important to shape the ideology of the AI, the purpose of an AI.
And adding on to that one, for Lena, also the holistic aspect behind AI, as was talked about just now, it is scary, definitely. So what can we do to actually curb that fear?
I think actually, so two things actually stands out to me when you actually mentioned what you did, and to also tap on some of the points that Kun raised, I'll try to be quite succinct. The first part is that the conversation actually goes into thresholds of harms. The second part is actually about AI being the only service that you do have when it comes to interacting with the business. I'll speak about the latter one first, because I think, for instance, as a lot of services actually becomes automated, there was an incident where I actually had to contact an airline company to actually correct my name because it was actually not entered correctly or something like that, and it actually went into this entire circle even though it's a phone, it was supposed to be an automated call, but it never actually went through. So in that sense, if the ability for a company to solve the problem is only facilitated by AI, will that actually help you keep your clientele and customer base? And I think a lot of companies have to think about that, because if you automate everything but it doesn't solve the problems of the people, then how do you actually ensure that the customers are actually satisfied? And in that sense, there may actually have to be different thresholds. I'm a little unsure about the legal aspects of this, like which court it should actually go to, or if it actually just should be in terms of like good faith as the business actually runs itself. Like it should actually feel responsible to actually answer the clientele or the clients or your customer base as it needs to. The first one about harms is as per what Kun raised earlier about children, for instance, and about navigating our way online, and how do we actually ensure that the environment that we navigate online is trusted. And actually there is a lot of stakeholders involved. You actually have your private sector, you have your government for governance, you have the users for their own public awareness. And over here, there can be a lot of emphasis on the users for them to always report a lot of things. If you see something wrong, report it. If you encounter different types of information, or the AI has actually done something wrong, report it. I do not like the tone of ChatGPT, report it. So I think there can be greater synergy between the private sector to be more proactive. There can be greater efforts for education to the public so that they understand usage, threats, concerns or biases, and the fact that AI is not almighty, so it may actually not know every single thing in the world, and you have to regard everything it gives to you with a grain of salt. There is also like an emphasis on the government, I think, to actually try, this is actually probably where it's heaviest, to actually try to be ahead of the curve, to actually understand how they can manage both the private sector and the general public, so that both would actually be prepared for the issues that the AI would actually place in the future. So that's actually some of the thoughts.
Thank you so much, Farlina. We'll take one more question from the floor. Oh, yes.
Hello, I'm Zainal from MIM. Question on sort of on behalf of the audience, because you've got SMEs, you've got C-suites here, you've got mid-managers and so on. What are the key takeaways and the key must-dos reacting or embracing AI, and also from today's conference, right? A lot of ideas and a lot of technologies moving forward. So from the lens of Sam, you're promoting AI. From Kun, you are an entrepreneur. Farlina, you are a think tank. What are the key must-dos that you can give as advice to the audience here? Thank you.
Sure. If I can start first to respond to Datuk's question. Not just NAYO promotes AI, but we must make sure that the AI is safe. Because otherwise it's just be a wild west of any AI. As key takeaways, if I were you, I'd be looking for what should I do after this seminar. I usually leave you with two things. Number one, please set up or have AI projects within your organizations. One small prototype project, short one, 3 weeks, 4 weeks kind of thing. Don't boil the ocean. Why? Because this will give you that first-hand exposure of an internal usage and internal understanding of what AI can do for your business. It can be any line of business that you want to focus on. As part of that, having that one project, I find that usually success comes when you assign to the most eager person that wants to understand the potential of AI, wants to realize the potential of AI for your company. That one person may not be an IT guy. Typically, it's not the IT guy. It's somebody that comes from sales, that comes from other lines of business, manufacturing, inventory, licensing, whatever. Pass that assignment to them. And this will then demystify a lot of things that we discussed today. They will give you a lot more appreciation of what this black box is all about. It will give you a first-hand experience and maybe will then upskill and reskill for some of you. As part of that, I would even extend if you have got your information coming from the prototype, that one small project, you will then find that you will attract birds of feathers. The rest of the other people within or external to your organization that are doing the same thing. And this is where you'll find that one of the biggest challenges that you'll find in the ecosystem is talent. How do we get the right people to take this from that small thing that we did last week to something that my entire company or entire country can use? This is where the question of talent then pops up. We don't have enough. But I have a short answer to that question. We actually have, number one, a lot of Malaysian experts as diasporas living outside Malaysia. And they actually want to contribute to nation building or perhaps even contributing to your company. So these projects, they can actually be participants of remotely, maybe as advisors in their very niche area of AI that they've been doing in the last 10 years outside Malaysia. That's number one. Number two, as you project out your projects, as you scale out your projects, you'll find that there is that trajectory of upskilling and reskilling for internal staff. And this is where I was talking to Dato outside, where you will then be able to hire for future jobs rather than looking at how do I do the same roles and putting AI on top of that. You find that the jobs will change. The third component there is then the graduates that you are interviewing. You'll find that obviously they have a gap between what they learn in university and what you expect them to do in the AI space of your company. But again, if you bring them, give them that chance, then they'll become the next AI engineer, the AI champion, and this is the 6 to 9 months kind of journey. And the last one is to tie back to the first question from the floor, which is about research and development. A lot of your businesses have research and development, but maybe AI is not in the picture. Tie AI in the picture, find a research and development partner / university / agency that does R&D. AI is front center, and then you have, I suppose if you tie all these things up, you have what you can do tomorrow, what you can do next month, and what will happen in your line of products in 1 year's time. I hope that answers you, Dato.
Thank you, Sam. So now ladies first or Kun?
Sure, I'll take a crack at it. And I think the answer will not deviate completely from what Sam has actually already established. I think the first thing that has to be explored is actually developing an AI policy for the company. Because coming from a think tank, obviously we come from a trade of a lot of written words, and words can actually be written by ChatGPT as it can actually also be typed by a human being. So in that sense, for us to actually understand when we adopt AI in anything that we do, where the adoption could improve productivity, where it may actually also affect or introduce bias, risk, or any types of issues that could actually come to our end product. That would be what our concern is. So certain things that we would actually have to be, that becomes almost standard practice is that if we actually use ChatGPT, there is actually the need to declare this paper was also had also used ChatGPT for grammatical purposes, and up to 80% of the suggestions were accepted. So certain things we actually have to declare to a certain extent. Internally, if not externally, published externally in our public usage, but there is the need to know exactly what we are actually adopting, how we're adopting it, and how we actually mitigate the issues that arises from it.
Thank you, Ferlina. And Kun?
This is such a difficult question, but it's a very good question. To try to not repeat the very smart answers of my neighbors and try to add something here. I think one thing that I see that also came, a question I was thinking about when I was asked earlier, what's the experience or the critical thought about it working in Malaysia, actually links back to your question in a way. I think adoption of AI, amongst all the other points that were made, there are two things that I can add here. I think one thing that is a recurring issue that I see when I talk to people, younger people that work in companies in Malaysia, is that there is quite a lack of vertical mobility within organizations. The most common feedback I hear is if I do something really well, my boss says he or she did it. If I did it really badly, I get burned by my boss. And if you want to adopt any new technology, AI, whichever, you need an environment where people get celebrated for the fact that they bring new technology in and they apply it. And in the absence of that culture of celebrating your staff, at least on a social, emotional, and maybe on an economic level, and maybe even on a title level for their additions, people are afraid to try new things because they are worried that their boss will get upset with them. And that is a much bigger thing for them than thinking about doing their job more efficiently because of AI. And I think that is actually really a huge issue. The fear of confrontation with bosses. I'm not saying that all staff is great. I mean, I employ people. It's tough sometimes. But if you want this innovation to come from your company and not just from a consultant that says you should do AI, you have to have a culture where that is celebrated. And the other thing I would say from my side is that, which goes back to the question of the gentleman before, I think providing employees a platform to learn how to be better in a synchronous environment, as in like people talking to people, direct communication, that will become a skill set. And the ability to steer AI well, to determine whether AI is misleading you or not, is the ability for you to be a better, well-rounded person that actually knows how to interact with people in real life. And I'll give one example if you don't mind. I hired a new software engineer, and he was working on AI agents. And without trying to hurt people's feelings here, software engineers are not always known for their amazing social skills. They are people of zeros and ones, and they write codes, and it's absolutes. So this person started writing an AI agent with regards to collections, and could not write a good purpose for the existence of the agent. So the agent became extremely binary and became extremely almost not. It was still empathetic, but not very much, right? Because this person referred to himself as Mr. Robot, the software engineer. But if you want a software product that uses AI and it's consumer-facing, it needs to be a product that is human. And the only way you can write a good AI agent, and as long as AI is not the consumer of products and humans are, you should create a platform as a company for people to become better at being people. Because especially young hires, their own social media, their own screens, they don't know how to interact synchronously with people as well anymore. That can be a huge selling point. You make your staff happier in their actual lives, and you make them better with AI because they know actually what it means to be themselves.
Thank you so much, Koen. So be human. So the way to tackle AI is to be more human.
Be yourself.
Be yourself. That's also very good. Now, before we close off the session, we have 1 minute left. So to close off the session today, I'd like each of you to give one word on what your hopes are for AI in Malaysia and the region. Ladies first.
Sure. Safe. I think I would like AI to actually be safe. I think, yes, for Malaysia and the region.
Empowering, I would say. Just empower people to be more.
I would underline the word I under AI, intelligence, which we hope to see more augmentation of intelligence within our society.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So thank you to the three of you. I think they've been a wonderful panel today. Short round of applause, please.